I am here with Timothy Brainard for our fourth and final conversation in this particular little series that we decided to do. And this is by far going to be the most open conversation, and it's really just to tie up any loose ends and any kind of thoughts that came up from our previous three conversations. So hi, Timothy.
Hi.
We ended our last conversation really, we really just talked about melancholy, and that's certainly been quite well received by a few people on my side. I've gotten quite a lot of, just phone calls and texts and emails just going, oh, listen to that. That was so interesting and really helped, or whatever, And then you did that wonderful document, the gateways of melancholy. And it made me think that maybe you could share with us a bit more, like, what does that mean, a gateway of melancholy? I mean, like, when I hear it, I presume that that means that as you go through that, something new opens up to you, that it's a very important threshold. But maybe you could explain more what those gateways mean. And also, what are we talking about in terms of percentage? Does everybody have a melancholy gateway of some sort, or is there some people that don't have any? Like, what's the ratio?
Great questions. Yeah, great questions. Well, to begin with, the gates of melancholy themselves actually come out of human design. So this is like taken straight from the human design system. And in the human design system, every body graph, every imprint of a person contains 64 total gate possibilities. And the gates that are activated in your body graph contribute to creating the design of you. So we've discussed human design. We've looked at it as a map of our energy, and these gates are contributing to that story. So that's what is meant by the gates of melancholy. Out of the 64 gates, you have this series of gates that are that exist along the individual stream or the individual circuitry, which is something we looked at in the last conversation that you and I had. So that's why they're called gates of melancholy, because they're actually all individual gates. Okay. Now, what's happening there is maybe less like a gateway that's opening up into new understanding, although as we learned last time we spoke, the energy that's moving through this circuitry, this stream, is intending to open up new possibilities, to open up and deliver new possibilities in order to have a positive evolutionary impact on the world outside of us. But in this case, when you're looking at the document that I built, you're looking at the voice that each one of those forms of melancholy speaks through. So you're melancholic over this, or you feel melancholic over that. And so you're getting a sense really for the particular flavors of your melancholy, what's likely to be most prominent in your experience. And so it is true that as you can turn your awareness to these qualities of sadness or melancholy within, that you can begin to relax into allowing that voice to kind of have its way. And so you can feel the way you're feeling as fully as you need to feel it until, boom, there's this awakening, this opening up. So there's always a benefit to awareness, but that's all we're really looking at. We're looking at the specific flavors of our design and the way that it speaks through melancholy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there would be some people that don't have any melancholy gates in their design.
Yes, so that's definitely a possibility, although statistically unlikely. Okay. The individual circuitry accounts for a large portion of the body graph in whole, and it would be quite a thing to have no individual activations anywhere in your design. I don't know that I've ever seen it, but it is statistically possible, just very rare.
Okay, so most people do have some. Okay.
Most people have something. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
The last conversation we had was very useful to me personally, because I had never thought about it with that degree of depth, and it has definitely been living on in me since our conversation. Might just read you my summation of that just came through like a few days ago. If I don't allow and even embrace the melancholy, then I perpetuate the anger, shame, bitterness, guilt, or whatever my personal issues are. I have to relive the emotions to extract the value of the experience, to give meaning and happening, to give meaning to the happening, and to understanding why I personally allowed or created it. What my personal messages are. If I don't allow this personal, I can't read my own writing.
I hate when that happens.
I know. Okay, if I don't allow this personal composting process inside of myself, then I end up reliving similar stories over and over. It is the melancholy that allows me to extract the value from the past, and in doing so, increase my own value moving forward.
Oof. Wow. Brilliant.
Yeah, that's kind of how it summed up in the end for me.
Oh, that's incredible. I would love to see that in writing. I wonder if there's a way for us to add that in the YouTube description or something, somewhere where we can actually see that in text, because it's a beautiful summation of what we learned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Rowan.
You're welcome. No, it did really, and I noticed how many songs. I mean, there's a one at the moment that's, I don't know if it's current or not, but my Aslan found it recently. It's a Maroon 5 song called Memories. And it's a melancholy song, you know, but there is so many songs. I mean, obviously artists, whether it's painters or poets or songwriters, you know, that is a major way we express our melancholy.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's something special about music, in particular about sound, and that's why the body key that serves to soothe melancholy is soundscape. So the reason that soundscape is so powerful in terms of how it addresses this particular part of us comes out of another technical piece of what we learned through human design, which is that every single one of us is basically made of sound waves. We're acoustic beings. That's the mechanical perspective that human design would take, which means that we're all literally vibrating in relationship to the world around us. And so there's something about music and whatever sound it is that resonates to your spirit in the moment that I believe on a surprisingly physical level, certainly on an energetic level, reorganizes us in relation to that moment. And so you listen to a song and it speaks to you, and it literally does. It affects you. Remarkable.
I mean, hence the popularity. And I mean, you know, concerts, like people pay like hundreds of dollars for one ticket just to experience that music live and have it vibrate through them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you begin to realize that actually you don't need music to have a musical relationship to life, because if we're energy and everything around us is energy and everything is vibrating and humming, it's like there's this beautiful interaction that's continually occurring, and you start to get an idea that, hey, maybe that's all really happening, and I'm just a little underdeveloped in terms of my sensitivity to what's happening. So in time, through turning our awareness to our bodies in this way, we do, in fact, I believe, as a result of my experience, we do begin to develop a greater and greater sensitivity to the true pulse of life.
Yeah.
And it's a feeling pulse. It's something you can actually feel. And it does involve chills down your spine, and like that way that your heart opens and the double doors of your chest open and your heart glows. You know, and all of these things are these ways that we radiate. They're very physical and they're acoustic as well. It's pretty exciting. It
is. So that brings me to something else we've touched on. So obviously, you know, human design is a system, and within that system, you've also created a system, the body keys. And we've also touched on the fact that as evolutionary beings, as people that have come here, you know, looking to become ultra consciousness and to ultimately transcend being physical. Not that it's a bad thing, it's pretty awesome. So ultimately, we're obviously, part of what we need to do is to transcend the systems, because the systems are there to kind of help us map into our being. And then once we're truly in our being, we get into this state where we are in touch with our EQ, our emotional intelligence, our BQ, our body intelligence, and obviously our intelligence, in this beautiful synergy and conversation with the world. And not entirely sure where I'm going with this. It's not exactly a question. But it's something that Ayman and I have been talking about quite a lot recently, as our own consciousness has done a bit of a leap in the last, basically over this lockdown, we've both experienced a pretty massive leap in awareness, and realizing that a lot of the things we've depended on very heavily in the past, namely the Enneagram, which I believe is one of the most open systems there is in the world, because it is built as a map to enlightenment. So it's built as a spiral. It's built to be transcended in its, in its conception. It was built to be transcended. But we're realizing more and more that it's not kind of serving us to go like, oh, that was my, my one wing, or that, like these kind of things that we used to do a lot to each other. And we're like, no, that needs to stop. Like it's gotten to a point where it's suddenly become a limiting factor instead of a freeing factor, because we know it so well.
Yes.
And so I guess kind of the question is, it with the body keys, like I'm really seeing it as a tool that you've helped to birth for people to get in touch with their BQ, their body intelligence. Would you agree with that? And then in so doing, hopefully kind of transcend the system.
Yeah, absolutely. So these different systems serve different functions for different periods of time. Human design is really useful in that it shines a light on our individual ways of functioning in life. But those functional aspects of our being are natural. We're learning about ourselves from the outside in. If we knew how to be ourselves, we wouldn't need any of that.
Right.
If we knew how to relax and just let ourselves be, I could just be Tim and you could be Rowan, and it would be fairly simple. But we've become alienated from our nature.
Yeah.
And that's where this system supports. But ultimately, if we're reconnected with that nature, the system becomes superfluous. It's no longer necessary. The body keys is similar and different. The body keys is actually both a light and a tool. So I like to refer to it as a map and a toolkit. First, it shines a light on what is most natural in you. And so in that way, it's very much like human design, in that it helps you to see something that is natural for you. And then there's a step in the body keys that I find to be central to the experience, which is the toolkit piece. And this is what we learn about in the body keys section. We're learning about what the body already knows, but by learning about it, we allow our conscious mind to proactively cooperate. And so in those moments where we may have previously argued with or disallowed or pushed past our limits or ignored ourselves in one way or another, we actually gain access to this new possibility, which is not to do that, and instead to begin to cooperate with the body intentionally. And so it's a resource. But again, how long will we need that resource? Well, only as long as it takes for us to relax and allow the body to do what it does without interference. The point of the resource is to learn over time to stop interfering, to cooperate instead of interfere, cooperate instead of interfere, over and over again. I don't know how long that could take. I mean, if you were really devoted to it and really paying attention, you could probably transcend the system in days. Yeah. This stuff it's meant to happen. It's natural for us. The hard work is the interference. As we learn how to relax that tendency, eventually it all just sloughs off. It's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think part of the beauty of learning to listen to your body is it does speed up those things, because I think so much of what we get stuck in is our human condition, which is a more ego-based issues, and those are so many times like why we don't follow the instinct. Like our body's going like, oh, I want to eat that. And then the mind's going like, that has sugar in it. You don't want to eat that. Like, and the body's going like, no, I want to eat that. You know, I mean, obviously sometimes it can be the other way around.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's interesting how it's more the human constructs that have got in the way, really, the ego constructs.
Yes. Well, it's all mental constructs. It's we've become very intellectual. So I've been thinking a lot about this over the past couple of days. In fact, the ways in which the human awareness centers have developed, yet again from a human design perspective. You know, and you began with this way of experiencing life that was very natural, and this was the splenic awareness, the first awareness center to develop in the human energy, right? So the splenic awareness, the spleen center. This is it's like a chakra or an energy, basically, and this awareness was an animal awareness. So we were one with nature. We were actually a part of that natural cycle that you see when you look at the trees and the squirrels and the birds. We were one with that. And so we actually existed in a state of oneness on that level. And then over time, a great deal of time, we developed the ajnic awareness. The ajna is our thinking capacity, the intellect. And in arriving at the ajnic awareness, we actually split ourselves in half, because here was duality. We existed in a state of natural being, oneness with all of nature, and then we became the seven-centered human being that we were, and we were very smart, and we became very smart, and all of our history is, like all of our recorded history is an awareness of this particular type of human, this particular form of awareness. It's mental. We've been driven out of our natural state of oneness by means of our intellect. And so it's become equal parts progressive and counterintuitive, as we are driven forward toward things like technology and modern advancement and civilization as we know it, and away from our natural way of being. And what's awakening now is what is known as the Trivian being. The third awareness center is awakening, and that awareness center is the solar plexus. Mm-hmm. It's emotion, it's feeling. And so what's going to happen is that, and this is, I say going to happen in the human design time frame, this really, really like kicks into being in 2027. So we're like right on the cusp of this remarkable transformation. And there are those of us who are proactively leaning into it. We're actually allowing this part of ourselves to awaken. And that awareness is, you might call it, you could call it logic grounded in heart. Here's the great mental capacity finding its roots in feeling, in the heart space. And that's what's opening. We're opening to feeling. And what happens when we do that is all three awareness centers then return to a state of oneness, but now they carry with them the great deal of wisdom that was gathered over the millennia of time in duality. So it's a much wiser state of oneness than the original animal awareness, which was fairly unconscious. Now we have total consciousness rooted in feeling. It's really something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you say that's a splenic awareness?
It started at the splenic awareness. It
is that what you have as a manifesting generator? You're a splenic type, no?
No, not everyone.
No.
Yeah, that's a completely different application of what's happening in human design. Right now, I'm just looking at the three awareness centers in the human design body graph. There are only three.
Okay.
Only two of them have ever been lived into in human history.
Okay.
And the third one is only just now on the cusp of being born, basically.
Wow. And would you say there's already people living into that now, kind of on the way to that being a more general experience for humanity?
I believe that there are those of us who are tapping the potential there. But what human design speaks to is a whole new form of human being. So the energetic structure and function of the human being will change, will literally evolve in the same way that we evolved from the seven-centered being, which we learned about in most of the ancient chakra systems and spiritual systems, the seven chakras aligned in sequence along the spine.
Yeah.
That being actually died off and evolved into what is known as the nine-centered being, which is the way that we're organized energetically now. But this is only a short span of time, just a couple hundred years of being this way before the true new human, known as the rave, is like born. And that's all happening as we speak.
Oh, exciting. Part of why it's so exciting to be around at this point in history.
Yeah. And of course, it's important for anyone listening to understand that I don't know if any of this is true. This is a cosmology. This is like a way of understanding what's happening. I personally do believe this to be happening, but I don't intend to like preach this. I want everyone to apply their own kind of responsible awareness to this and consider what it might mean.
Yeah. Well, it's like when, spiritual truths, it's always like, it's an inner knowingness that something's real, but there's no certainty to it, and there never will be. We can't be certain if there's God, goddess, all that it, whatever our belief systems are, but there's an inner knowingness, and I call it an isness.
Yeah.
It's an isness.
Yeah, it is an isness. Yeah. There's something else that comes up for me too. You were talking about body listening and the body intelligence and these different things. So, and this just occurred to me. I've never said this before. So you and I, we're just swimming off in these uncharted waters, basically. So every one of us contains two distinct forms of consciousness: a body consciousness and personality consciousness, or the mind and the body, right? And I realized that we're built for two things. We're built for being in the body and noticing in the mind. But what we have become is really twisted up. We don't know how to be, and we're really bound up with figuring things out in the mind. So we are neither being nor noticing. And what I'm just now realizing is that what I refer to as body listening is the bridge. Body listening is not the for all time thing. It's the bridge that allows us in time to relax into being and noticing. So what it does is body listening turns that incredibly capable awareness center of the mind in towards the body, so that we can begin to basically gather evidence for the mind to begin to understand that the body actually is functioning and conscious and experiencing life as an intelligence of its own. And so when the mind gets enough evidence like that, it relaxes. And it says, okay, so the body is actually contributing to this story. It's not like an unfortunate, tag along. It's actually a part of the story. And so as we learn to be, the mind relaxes and is then finally allowed to begin watching, witnessing, noticing. We're here to be and to see, being and noticing. And then finally, after all of that has been allowed, and this is quite a process, by the way, it takes time for us to learn how to listen in, right?
Yeah.
Once we've done this, then and only then can we even begin to truly contribute. We're so focused. I'm sorry, go ahead. I could go on and on.
I was just saying, because that's, that's awareness, right? That's when you really blossom into an awakening, and real time things just flow through you. You don't have to think about them anymore. And that is the point at which you transcend the systems. And hopefully as we wake up more and more, you get glimpses of that. And I'm sure you've had them where you're in situations and all of a sudden there's this stuff pouring through you and you're like, I've never even thought that before. Like, where did it come from? And it's just because your awareness is vast enough that you can be tapped into all the knowledge of all your lifetimes and all of humanity, because ultimately oneness is real. And what really blocks it more than anything is it's interesting, you were saying being and noticing, right, was the two, and we've kind of given them both up for a third one, which is doing.
That's right. Oh my.
Right.
Yeah.
We've substituted the real ones for this kind of
artificial attempt.
Yeah. Which requires studying and all of this stuff. Whereas, I can remember Lazarus saying early on, like, if you really, really loved yourself enough, it would be all you ever have to do, because you would have all the access to all the knowledge that ever was.
Yes. It's all built in.
It's all built in, and everything else is only there as little stepping stones to help you to love yourself enough to have all the knowledge and all the awareness and all the access.
That's right. Which is actually why I don't totally align with the idea of transcending any systems, because I actually don't see us getting like up over it so much as down under. It's more of a remembering. It's like almost like a backwards process of remembering rather than like this forward leaning process of perfection. Perfection isn't something we attain to. It's built in. We've forgotten it. And so we're up here working so hard. There's nothing to do up here.
Yeah.
You know, all of our doing is exactly what alienates us from the simple fact of being, the gift of being.
Yeah.
Wow, this conversation is a good one. This is the really important stuff that underpins everything else we've talked about up until now. And if any of us were even able to touch the slightest potential of what we're talking about now, everything we've talked about up until now can be forgotten.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of really smart and helpful stuff, but it's all about what we're arriving at here.
I know, it's so funny. I mean, we've often talked about that, how like, actually this was something that you said on that beautiful podcast I listened to you on with Allison. And you said something about like, you know, the more into all of this you get, the more airy-fairy and like woo-woo it can sound, because there's no words, because we'll get back to isness. It's just like your access is absolute, and you're swimming in this consciousness, and it's like the book that we just came out with, The Age of Consciousness. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but
yes, of course I have.
I sometimes like read it back and I'm like, God, if someone was just coming to this with no spiritual basis, it could sound like the biggest bunch of woo-woo, like rubbish, but actually it's very top line and it's super real, you know. But if you don't have any foundations to land it on, it would sound pretty out there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. The greatest wisdom is always presented in the simplest format. And if it's not simple and obvious, then it's probably not yet wisdom.
Yeah.
Complexity is and complication in particular, these are functions of the mind, and they drive us away from the true heart of what's obvious and true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, it's a paradox. Richard Rudd talks about this every time that he arrives at the acidic level of any of his gene keys. It's the same story every time. It's like you hear him over and over again apologizing for the words. Like this isn't a space for words. When you arrive at this, there's nothing to say.
Yeah.
You know,
it's so true.
It's true.
Yeah.
And we actually tap this. If you've ever been deeply in love, and if you've ever, I mean, like not just infatuated, not interested in, not excited about, I mean in love, where you look into the eyes of another and you become lost in the totality of who they are and in the totality of that space that you occupy together, you've known this. There is not a word that you can speak that does not minimize the reality of that moment. If you look at them and you speak, I love you, you can try.
Yeah.
But you'll watch the words fall flat.
Yeah.
Because
so
what you're
great.
experiencing is larger.
Yeah.
So this is the reality that each of us gets to live in. You know, life in every direction, regardless of whether it feels wonderful or ouch, there's the opportunity for us to meet it that fully. Yeah. And that's what we're here to do. That's how we can really learn. Learning is not about studying. It's not about getting smart. It's about getting into just the very fact of existence, the movement of life itself. I was just reading something yesterday from Jung, actually. I guess because he speaks to this in just really clear terms that I appreciated a lot. He said, "Woe betide those who live by way of examples. Life is not with them. If you live according to an example, you thus live the life of that example. But who should live your own life if not yourself? So, live yourselves." He says, like, just do the work of living, you know? Live your own life. I love it. It's so simple and clear. Yeah. And he goes on and like that, but this is what it is. The whole story is contained in simply being, but we don't know how to do that. So we need all these tools to help us to remember. And that's what the body keys is.
Yeah. I think that's really true about the being. And it's interesting because I can remember very early on in my personal spiritual journey, being blessed with a reading from the Zara, a personal reading. And they said, you know, part of your strength is in your being, like, you know, and that's really hard to accept, that that's part of your power, because you don't have to do anything, you just turn up. And I was like, yeah, okay, you know, and it sounds great, you know, but like, what do I do with that? And you know, put it on the side. Fast forward, I don't know, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And I end up in the Middle East at the time, this is 10 years ago, in my mother-in-law's house. And I have, you know, maids and a driver and no house to keep. My office isn't here. Like, I have nothing to do, like, that I have to do. And so gradually over time, I get more and more into this kind of state of being, and wonderful things happened in terms of, it really, really kicked my spiritual butt, because the energy in the Middle East is obviously a lot heavier than California or even America. And so to stay in my normal high resonance that I was used to, I had to really apply everything I'd learned in terms of meditation, yoga, all of those things. And in doing that, and in making my spirituality more primary in my life, because I had the time to, and because I had to in order to just feel good, I kind of went into this space of really being. And the effect that I had over those years was very tangible in the fact, you know, I'm part of a very big family here, and in the culture, you know, because all of those kind of spiritual realities were just being born here, and they're still very, very new. And I realized that I was having so much effect doing nothing. Like, you know, I wasn't even cooking for myself, you know what I mean? And it was when I suddenly understood the kind of reality that if you just live this, people feel it, and people want it, because they feel like you're calm and you're, you know, whatever it is, you know, your awakeness. And for the first time, I had like a tangible kind of like picture of what that being meant and the impact it had. And now here I am back here in quite a big way.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah.
And this, you know, what I love most about your story is it's real. There's a great deal of time that plays out. You know, oftentimes we'll meet these systems in the body keys. It may fall prey to this same kind of like tendency, in that people think, oh, okay, so I just have to take this class, complete this certification course, hire this coach for 90 days, you know, teeny tiny little stretch of time, and then they think they're going to have it figured out. But what we're dealing with here is a complete restructuring of our way of meeting life. It takes time, and regardless of how intentional you are, how committed you are, how much you mean it, it's going to take time.
Yeah.
And it's going to take as much time as it takes. And sometimes that will be overnight. It'll blink of an eye. A shaft of awareness shifts who you are internally, and it's a done deal. Sometimes it's like that, and sometimes it's 10 to 15 years. And the reality is that we're not the ones in control of that. What we are in control of is how we turn ourselves toward that work.
Yes.
Right? And release ourselves to the perfection of timing in its own right, to realize that we are not the ones in control. This is really what's meant by surrender. In human design, there's this thing that Ra used to say all the time about no choice, no choice. And many, many people who I think are kind of wrapped up in like experiencing human design as like a somewhat more cultish system, you know, these people who see it as the end all be all. Which of course I'm not one of those, but you'll often hear them kind of parroting this idea of no choice. But that's really what we're talking about here. It's releasing ourselves to this understanding that nature with a capital N is perfect as is, and that each one of us is an expression of that. We're not the ones in control. What we can control is whether or not we are releasing ourselves to that pulse of life or not. And unfortunately, what we've done with this ability, this free will, this ability to control, is we've learned to swim really hard upstream and to make things difficult for ourselves, when we could use that same awareness to relax and to surrender and to allow, until eventually we're no longer wasting that beautiful energy of choice on fighting with ourselves, at being at odds with our lives. And then that choice opens up and becomes the very awareness that you just described. And
becomes so powerful. I mean, choice is what defines us as humans, really. It's the defining factor between us and animals. It's that only, we have the ability to consciously choose and thus to direct energy.
That's right, which is creating, which is creation. Yeah. And so rather than creating, we make ourselves small and compromise the reality of what we're capable of. And it's really, it's psychotic. There's no other explanation. We do not need to be this way. I remember I was studying various different forms of embodiment practices and techniques and systems, and I met the Alexander technique. I'm curious to know if you've ever heard of the Alexander technique.
I studied it. A little, not a ton.
It's the philosophy, the principles that underlie that system just fascinate me. And I remember the first AT lesson that I ever took, and it was with a friend of mine, a bit older than myself, who was like, decades into this study himself. And so I went to this lesson, and Mike, I couldn't believe how often I was asking him, like, well, what can I do? Like, I was trying to like reposition and restructure myself, because it's supposed to be this body working session,
Right.
And he kept kind of like gently putting his hands on my shoulder, and he said, nothing, stop helping. Please stop helping. I don't need your help. And it really scrambled my little pea brain, because wait, but shouldn't I just what if I sit more like this or more like this, or just stop? He goes, all of your effort to help is going in the opposite direction. It is your effort to help that is misaligning what is natural for you. So just relax. And what kept coming up for me was, first, how do I help? And then, no, I don't need your help. And then, yeah, but how? But how do I relax? But it's like, it was comical, and it was clearly demonstrating the very issue that we all face. We don't know how to be. So whether it's the Alexander technique or the body keys or all of the above, we find these ways of remembering how to be.
Yeah. That brings me to something that I heard in one of the Gene Keys one day, and I can't remember which one it was, but that, like, all those kind of, yoga, Alexander, like all the body systems really apply to certain people as a means as a route to your freedom, to your city, and not to everybody. And I guess that's true for everything. That it's like, vegetarian, vegan, this and that. It's like, no, there's no one way. But I found that kind of amazing, that there was actually certain ones of us where that is a route to enlightenment. And for everybody else, it's like, yoga smoga. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was wondering if that related to the body key of activity.
Yes.
So if you have that body key, you're one of those people where that type of thing is, quote unquote, a potential, enlightening process.
Oh, well, actually, if the body key of activity is going to apply itself differently to each one of those different types. So someone who is going to be, whose experience is going to be illuminated through a system like yoga, that will be an expression of their body key of activity, just like going for a road trip the other day was an expression of it for me. Just like a Zen koan will be an expression of it for another person. Think about the activity involved with something like, playing over and over and over again the challenge of a koan. You picture this monk, whether they're seated in complete stillness, or like pacing a courtyard. They're at work.
Right.
And it's a very active work. Activity, each of these body keys is vast in its potential, and the way that it expresses through an individual is going to be a function of their elemental expression and a function of their total individual nature, which is why I built the body keys as such a general container. There are only 7 of each category. That's by design. I don't want it to become this big, smart web of intellectual processes. I want it to be very clear, very simple, and then I want you to identify how you express that key.
Right.
Yeah, that's the real work. So, yeah. But you're right. I mean, absolutely, you're right in recognizing that this is something that plays out differently for each type.
Yeah, I remember that really, I don't know why, but that really hit me, because I suppose because I had always kind of maybe felt like I didn't do those things enough or whatever. I mean, I'm kind of a yogi, but like casually, and I know people that have, really gone far with it and have woken up a lot through it. And I'm like, God, should I just be better so that I can wake up? And then I realized, no, that's because it's their path, that's their route to awakening. So yeah, it really hit me when he said that. I wish I could remember what key it was, but anyway.
I'm curious to know if there were other questions that you've come up with as a result of your experience of the body keys.
The thing about compromise has kind of, because I feel like I was actually trying to look it up before our phone call. I think in my PHS thing, there was this line where you said, don't compromise, or like never
must not compromise, all caps.
Yeah, yes, right? Was it in
Yes.
the PHS? So what does that look like? I mean, compromise is kind of especially when you live in a family, it's a part of life. So how do you, when you say must not compromise, like what does that look like to you when what's behind the words?
Great question. So compromise is one of those words like love, where, the single word really depends upon its context, right? So in this case, you're right in understanding that in a relationship, and we're always in relationship, compromise is a necessity. We should compromise. We should negotiate. We should come to an understanding. That is not the form of compromise I'm referring to. I'm referring to that phenomenon of compromising ourselves. So you can compromise with someone, and there's the motivation is it's positive, it's beautiful. There's a collaborative element to finding compromise, right? A position. But to compromise yourself is a different thing altogether. What I'm referring to when I say do not compromise is I'm referring to that tendency, and it's a very human, very modern human tendency, especially, to make ourselves smaller than we are, to give ourselves away to things which are not aligned with the truth in us. Ultimately, what I'm referring to as compromise is dishonesty. It's saying, well, this isn't true for me. My heart isn't in this. I'm not interested in this. I don't want to. Right? All these different ways that we recognize the truth and then go in the opposite direction because ...
Right.
That's compromise. That is the all caps. Don't do it. Because what we do is we stop the flow of our nature, and we deplete ourselves in a direction that has nothing to do with us. And this is true of what we eat. It's true of the projects that we take on, the conversations that we have, the relationships that we commit our energy to. It's true of just about every moment of our lives. So if we can attain to those moments one by one in a way that feels forward into the truth of what's alive in us. Do I really want to be writing this Facebook post right now? Is this like, am I inspired by this right now? Is there nothing else in the world that I would rather be doing? If yes, then stick with it, because that post, I promise you, is going to have its impact. If no, then the best, most healthy, and most honest thing for you to do is to simply set it aside for now and to feel forward into that next thing that is alive. We're either connected to the pulse of life in this beautiful dance, which again, we are in no position of control in relationship to. Our control is choosing to stay connected to the pulse.
Right.
You know, the choice is to stay dancing, to keep dancing. You know, that's the ultimate choice. And if we can do that, then we watch life take us into this next moment, and then the next, and then the next, in a way that unfolds a continual mystery. You had read that piece that you wrote, and I hope we're able to like type that out and include it if you're comfortable with doing that.
Sure.
Because I feel that it's really important. But it jumped right out to me, and it seems like it's ever since you said it, which was like more than an hour ago, I've held it like in me, like we need to look at this. You said something about bringing meaning to the happening.
Right.
And you like misread it and then reread it, bringing meaning to the happening. So I want to make a distinction between meaning making and reason making, because what we're really good at is reason making. Something happens and we find all the reasons for it. Well, this must be happening because this is how we argue with our lives. The thing happened. There's a period at the end of that. It's a fact. It happened. It is real. The reasons that we wrap around it, they are not real. And the reasons retract us from the reality of the moment, bring us up into this mental space, and typically a reason is going to make us uncomfortable with the happening.
I think that is such an important point. Very good catch, because it's like that thing of like, well, it's basically giving your power away to something outside of yourself, because it was, you know, in my defense, the moon was full. I could not help it.
That's correct. Yeah. Mars was in retrograde or some silliness. Yeah.
And when we give away responsibility, then we give away our power. And I think so much of when we get overly involved in the mental constructs does end up giving our power away. And absolutely, you're right. What I was saying there is like deriving the meaning from the happening, because even if the meaning was like, oh my God, I was completely playing victim, I need to see that. Yes. So that in the next story, I can play a different role. If I don't want to be a victim, if I want to be a victim, carry on. But like I suddenly have choice in the matter, because I've extracted the meaning from, you know, from that story.
Yes, chills. That's exactly it. And the remarkable thing about this distinction is that both reason making and meaning making utilize the mind.
Right.
We're not, this isn't about saying the ego or the mind is wrong and we should transcend it. No. This is about how we utilize it.
Yes.
This is an orientation of its function. So you're either making reasons and making yourself miserable, which I would believe to be a poor use of the mind, or you're extracting meaning. And you don't even need to extract meaning in some cases. You can make meaning. You know, when I pour a cup of tea, it's meaningful. That meaning is something that I actually inject. What am I doing? Nothing. I'm pouring tea. It doesn't actually mean anything, except I wish for it to, and so that simple activity expands. So meaning, whether we're extracting or injecting meaning, both of which are remarkably useful, meaning is always an imaginative process. It requires for us to become the student, the child. We have to become curious and interested.
Yeah.
It's playful, and it is fertile. I mean, so creative. Reason making never is. Reason making is cold, and it's logical. It seems logical. It would be logical if it didn't deplete us and make us miserable.
Yeah.
You know? But actually the true logic, and this is that trivian logic that I was referring to, the logic rooted in heart, is the playful type, the imaginative type, the creative type that allows something ordinary, even something uncomfortable or painful or raw and uncomfortable, it allows it to become just ripe with meaning.
yeah, or it allows it to become fuel for something as well. It allows it to become like an energy.
An impetus, yes.
Yeah, that's,
What a huge difference.
yeah, really huge. And from the outside, nobody would know the difference.
Never, no.
But from
It's
the
all internal.
inside, one is totally expansive and the other one is totally contracting.
Oh, yes, that's it. Expansive versus constrictive, contractive. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is the reason for today's call. Like, to arrive at this awareness, I can feel it. It's like, I really hope that people understand the feeling difference. Yeah, right? It's happening for me too.
Yeah.
And it was there in your writing at the very start of the conversation. And it wasn't even like a full sentence. It was like this tiny little blip, but it's the whole story.
And what that came out of, that piece of writing, and what has made me really, I was already very much in the process of making peace with melancholy, like just allowing it, because of, as I told you, my whole concept of isness. Well, it just is. What am I going to do about it? Like, you know, but what I loved about when you very first explained it is how it's a wave, and a wave comes in and comes out. Like, there's nothing you can do about it. It's going to go and it's going to come back. And there's something about thinking about it, and I'm really looking forward to friends of mine I know who you know do melancholy well, really hearing that.
Yes.
Because it's, for me, that's where all the beauty lies, is in that knowledge of, you know, the fact that the wave will come out if I just ride it and don't try and constrict it, you know. And
Right.
yeah, and out of that comes that ability to extract the meaning, because you're allowing the penetration of the wave.
That's right. That's right. It's a question of relationship.
Yeah.
Are you self-protecting and guarding and defending and saying no to something that's going to happen anyway? Or are you saying, okay, then let's see what you have to show me? And this is actually another, these are fine distinctions, by the way, that you and I are drawing. They're subtleties. They're internal motivational subtleties. We're speaking to a level here, by the way, that most people will really kind of struggle to connect to, but that everyone will relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Because as humans, we actually get the difference. We struggle to remember them oftentimes in the moment. But when you're speaking to isness, you know, there are two ways of arriving at this. The first is apathetic. It's shrug shoulders, like, well, I guess I have no control over this anyway. So you just let yourself become bulldozed. You know, it's happening, so it's happening to me.
Right.
Right. The alternative is an empowered position. It's an awareness that everything happens for you, not to you. And that is a matter of friendship. You're learning how to befriend the process. So apathy serves no benefit to us, none. Yeah. Apathy is, in fact, the opposite end. It's the limp expression of reactivity, where we guard and defend and fight. Apathy is equally disempowered. But friendship, relationship, dancing, these words that we've been exploring this whole time, these are empowered stances, and they allow us to, again, cooperate with, to come into contact with, to flow with, to expand into the movement itself. So we're learning how to befriend melancholy. We're learning how to befriend our bodies. We're learning how to befriend our challenges and our shadows. All of these things that we might otherwise choose to defend against, we're learning how to befriend them so that we can learn through them, so that we can grow, and so that we can become more and more adequate dancers. And in time, artful dancers, skillful dancers, beautiful dancers, individual dancers.
And there's something about that witness, the witness mind, that is empowered, I think, in those situations. Because when you deal with something from a perspective of isness without being apathetic to it, then you do just have to sit with it. It's like, well, you know, I can judge this, I can make myself wrong, I can any number of a million different things to like distract myself from this. But so yeah, there's something, I find there's something about that, like kind of allowing the witness mind to be there, that when you get to those very, very painful things, and I think I think it's really important at this point in history to realize that, you know, when we're healing things like abuse, like, you know, trauma, like, you know, this, we're not just healing it for ourselves. We're talking generations and generations, chills again. And you almost can't go there without this kind of allowing the witness mind to be the one that's holding it, because it's too much for the body sometimes, you know. But in going there as just an isness, like with no judgment, like taking all the attachments away from it and just kind of being witness to it, and knowing that when you're in the witness mind, you know that it doesn't have to be. So you can see your own role, you can see the victim that you played, and you can suddenly be responsible for it in a way that you couldn't when you were stuck in the middle of the pain of it, because it's too painful. I mean, my God, the shit that's happened, like, you know, I'm here in Beirut. I mean, like, the shit that's happened, like, is inhuman. And there's plenty of us that have been through things that were inhuman. Like, by contrast, my lifetime, this lifetime has not been that intense, but I'm sure it has been in other lifetimes. Like, you know, there's just this level of pain that is so hard to be with when you're one with it. And there's something about allowing the witness to be there that allows you, I mean, of course, we're always one with it, but it allows us to hold it in a space of just allowing, that allows the honesty of like what role you're playing to be there, and for you to be like, wow, you know, I can forgive those people, because me holding them on a string is only hurting me ultimately, you know.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, you're saying that we can hold it in our awareness itself, in awareness. That's the thing. It's like, if there were a voice to that witnessing awareness in those moments, it would be just wait and watch. Just wait and see. You know, something is happening. Just wait and see. And that's a far cry from the panicked scramble of, how do I fix this? What do I do? What is happening? Whose fault is it?
Yeah.
Right? And so what you're describing is something very empowered.
And
but it can really only
come. You just said is all giving reasons to it.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's right.
Plus, it's extracting the meaning.
It's funny. It's reasons and doing. What do I do? Whose fault is it? So, like, actually, it's really beautiful the way that everything you just shared wraps together the totality of our discussion leading up to this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so major takeaway from this is that in those moments when we're hurting, when we're addressing an old wound, the thing to do is not to do anything. You know, like, it's funny. There's so much pressure in those moments that we feel most compelled to act, make decisions, communicate, understand. But the understanding can never be arrived at in the throes of the event.
Yeah.
Which is why we must take that one step back and just wait and see. Just wait and see until at a certain point the awareness happens. We arrive at the clarity. And then all the questions are answered.
Sorry, say that again.
Oh, I just said, and when it does, all of the questions that we've been holding all along, they're answered. And then the things that we need to communicate, it's simple, it's clear.
Goes with what I was about to say, which is it comes as a knowingness. You know, there's like,
yes.
I actually did an experiment, probably in closing, I'll just share this because I think it was a valuable experiment. I mean, people think I'm crazy, which I am, but I did a root canal in my 20s with no anesthesia.
Oof,
and I did it partly to see if I could do childbirth, because I was like, if I can do a root canal, then childbirth's going to be fine. And I also did it just to see if I could stay in the witness mind and not associate to the pain, you know?
Yes. Okay.
And the dentist that did it for me, he did not want to do it. And he looked at me and he said, if you flinch, I'm giving you the anesthetic. And I said, okay, that's fair enough, fair dude, no problem. And so I did not flinch.
Oh,
And
wow.
I had this mantra that was super simple. It was just like, I am not the pain. It's not who I am. The pain is happening, but it's not me, you know? And I was able to sit there without flinching for, 45 minutes. And it was excruciating, but it wasn't, because I was in the witness mind of it. Like, it was happening, but it wasn't me. I didn't have to be traumatized by it. It just was something that was passing.
Yeah, that's it.
That I knew would pass.
Yes. That's what it is. And that's the promise of emotion, feeling, melancholy, all of these different things, life itself. Because it's moving, it absolutely will change. The way that you feel now is not the way you will feel later.
Yeah.
That's the promise. And so with that awareness, there is an objective kind of stance there, but it's not a disconnected objectivity.
Yeah.
It's an awareness. It's exactly what you've described. Witnessing is a beautiful word for this. I believe that's the word you've been using, and it's the word I would choose to use, because witnessing is very alert. It's intentional. It doesn't miss a beat. And yet it maintains that necessary distance between the subject and the object, right? It's important. It's scientific almost in that way.
It allows for the awareness mind. So it allows the decision to come within a container versus from a single point, which from a single point, you almost have to employ reason and all of those things. Whereas if it's from a container perspective of awareness, then you can get to just a core, an isness.
It provides that context,
the
broad view. It's very, very necessary. Man, this has been an interesting conversation, Rowan.
Yeah. Ooh, time to get the darkness.
Yeah. Wow. I'm wondering if you feel that what we've touched on today, if we've managed to do it in a way that's practical enough for people to live in it, or if it's been primarily theoretical.
I actually think it's quite practical. What do you think?
I sincerely hope so.
I feel like there's a lot of, I feel like we, between us kind of gave some examples of, living into that state.
Yes.
And if you can see someone else doing it, it gives you the icon of how you can do it. So I would hope so. I would hope that there's some tools here for people. Good.
I think there will be. And I think that anyone listening, if you're arriving at this moment, you're going, we're there, like, go back, because this is a treasure trove. And neither of us planned it. That's the other way you can really tell that there's like something happening here that's beyond Tim or Rowan.
Yeah.
Like this was an important conversation. Thank you, Rowan, for hosting it.
Thank you so much too. It's been beautiful, and the whole series is beautiful. I love it that it's a 4. We're complete on this arc, and I look forward to connecting with you in the future in whatever way comes next. But thank you very much for your work and the intention and depth that you put into it.
You are so welcome. Thank you for your interest in it and for providing this container to discuss it. I mean, what a pleasure. And yeah, I'm already looking forward to whatever that next step is. It will reveal itself to us when the time is right.
Indeed, it will.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim.